talking the Reef Stalked. This one is written and directed by Andrew Traucki, who also directed the original Reef back in 2011. He was also responsible for the crocodile thriller Blackwater. Now, the original Reef, the 2011 movie, was actually considered to be one of the better shark movies outside of the original Jaws film. And how did he do in this sequel? Well, let's discuss the plot first of all. It actually starts off quite similar in a way to Neil Marshall's Descent. We have a group of female friends, one of which loses their life at the beginning of the movie, and then because the remainder of the movie takes place sometime later, with the remainder of the group trying to honour their fallen friend's memory by kind of going on a little bit of a trip. And instead of cave diving like the Descent, this instance they decide to go a bit of snorkeling, scuba diving and kayaking on this kind of beautiful coastal district area. However, as you probably expect, because this is a shark movie, of course, there is a large great white in the vicinity which decided it's going to stalk this group of women for its lunch. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what we think of the Reef Stalked. Now, there's been a lot of shark movies over the last few years, and I'm pleased to say this one does fall in the good camp of shark films. As to how good, well, we have to wait to the end of the review. But let me talk about what I think works. And here's the main thing. I'm just going to go straight in with my biggest plus point on this. This movie is a masterclass in creating tension. It is a really tense film. I haven't felt this tense in a shark film since the original 47 Meters Down, a film that I genuinely loved because it was so tense. And this one really does make me feel pretty tense whilst watching it. Traucki is a kind of an expert of creating this kind of lurking menace, this fear from the unknown under the waves, because you know it's there. And we have sequences where, you know, our friends are out in this kind of water, and sometimes the shark will be there, sometimes it's where, but it has a great kind of build up. You know, the music, the kind of the cinematography, the kind of the slow kind of you know, sequences where someone's kind of reaching out for a paddle or something like that, and you don't know whether the shark's going to attack. Sometimes, as I say, it will, and sometimes it doesn't. It's not there at all. So I think it's really good in regards to creating a tense movie with kind of like that feels kind of genuinely dangerous, because our protagonists are out there pretty much on their own. Actually, they tend to be in these kind of shark movies, and yeah, but the danger feels palpable, I have to say. I think our cast of four characters, these four women, you know, are a likeable bunch. They seem like kind of genuine friends, and I think the acting for the four of them are all pretty solid. I think there's some kind of decent kind of set pieces involving this kind of shark. I mean, it does kind of rinse and repeat a little bit, which we'll come on to. But there are some kind of fun sequences where having this kind of shark attacking, and it actually takes a lot of kind of like cues from other movies. As I've said, the kind of the setup is very much like The Descent, but there's kind of there's cues from Jaws here. You know, we have an attempt to kill the shark, for example, where they use an object to try and make it drown, and it will remind you of kind of the barrel scene from Jaws. You know, we have kind of kids playing on a raft. It reminds you of you know, the Shallows, things like that. So it does take elements from other movies, but I feel the movie does you know, it did justice, in fact, because it still incorporates them in a kind of a quite entertaining way. I was engaged throughout the movie. One of the things that made Jaws such a good film was its characters, because the shark, let's be honest, isn't on screen a hell of a lot, and what you could have attached it to that film is good character work, and I think that is true of this film as well. The shark effects are a little bit of a mixed bag. We'll come on to what doesn't work in just a moment. But the director here, like he did in kind of Blackwater and kind of The Reef, rather than having a lot of kind of CGI and kind of model work, he chooses to use footage of real kind of animals. And admittedly, some of it looks like kind of stock footage just inserted into a film, but there is some that is incorporated very well. For example, when, you know, the shark is biting down on the kind of the boat, things like that, it looks, you know, you think it's biting down on that boat with these people in it. And there are a couple of instances where I think they've used real footage and kind of superimposed you know, our actors on there, or vice versa. And those sequences where it's using the kind of the real shark or real shark, you know, footage, is done fairly well, I have to say. And we also got a lot of kind of like, you know, the fin in the water, which is used very, very kind of effectively. I think the cinematography is excellent. You know, it kind of erects you so there's kind of this beautiful kind of setting, but obviously, you know, you have the facades of beauty, but we have this kind of danger ever present, kind of lurking beneath the waves. I think the soundtrack, it really kind of works to accentuate the kind of the tension in the movie, and the movie overall is pretty entertaining. You know, you get about half an hour in really before we kind of get the kind of shark attacks, but I think the movie gives us a reasonable amount of kind of in-depth kind of character work before then, so it doesn't feel like you're having to wait ages until you get the action and things like that. Okay, so what doesn't work? I feel this movie has its dumb moments, and there's certain character choices and things that they do in this movie that you're just thinking, why would people do this? I'll give you a couple of examples. We have our 4 kind of friends out on the kind of sea at one point, and one of them is quite inexperienced. You know, she's kind of like the one that doesn't normally come out of the group, and she's actually the younger sister of our main character, and she sees a shark, and she tells the group that she's seen a shark, but they decide they're going to split up. So rather than kind of sticking together in like a caravan of these kind of kayaks, you know, 2 of them are like way ahead, one of them is kind of like a little bit further on, and then leaving this very inexperienced girl just after she shed a shark, like way behind. And of course, then that's where the shark decides it's going to have its first attack. Which seemed like an odd choice to me. It seemed like these characters just went off and left her without really ever checking. It just, you know, it seems just a little of an odd choice. We have a sequence in the movie where we encounter like a family of other characters, and they're on this island, and they're like, oh, have you got any, you know, phones? No, there's no phones on here. But how are these people like on this island without any means of communication and escape? I mean, surely they have at least a flare gun, but that's never asked for. I mean, why these people would be on an island trapped without any boats or kind of communications is beyond me, without any type of at least a flare gun. And then we have a couple of other instances. I don't want to go through every single one, but there are a couple of instances where, again, it's just like silly kind of decisions, movie decisions to kind of make the kind of the plot go in a kind of a certain direction. Now, when you compare that to the original Reef, I would say that was much more of a realistic film. I think in a portrayal, to a point, you know, where a portrayal of someone in that kind of peril, I think would act quite kind of naturally. Here, you know, it's like movie decisions rather than kind of like real life decisions. Now, in regards to the acting, I think our 4 main cast do a great job. But there are some kind of smaller roles here where the acting isn't particularly strong. They're minor roles, it's not a big deal. They don't have a huge amount of screen time. But I have to kind of point it out. The CGI of the shark. Now, when the movie does use CGI, unfortunately, it's quite poor. Now, it uses mostly real footage of sharks for the bulk of the shark, or it uses like a practical fin or something like that. But when we do have a shark via CGI, normally when it's breaching, that looks quite poor. There's even one shot where it doesn't even look like it's finished, to be honest. It's a shame, because this to me seemed like a bit of a higher profile shark movie compared to some of the kind of the normal kind of straight to VOD kind of movies, and it's a shame it couldn't have a little bit more rendering on the kind of the shark. It just is a little bit too fake at times. Yeah, but it doesn't use this CGI all that much, to be honest. So when we do have the CGI, it looks poor, but wisely they use the CGI to a minimum. It's like maybe kind of like no more than sort of 10 seconds of screen time, but you will notice it in those 10 seconds, I have to say. The movie does feel somewhat derivative of other movies. I think it kind of homages them quite well, if that's what it was doing, and I think people may not even notice, but it does seem to be using the best parts of other films, to be honest, to kind of make this one. If the original Reef was quite kind of a realistic depiction, very much people often compare the original Reef to Open Water, and if that was somewhat of an original kind of a bit realistic kind of idea of a shark attack movie, this one's a lot more kind of like typical kind of movie logic. It doesn't feel quite as raw as the kind of the original one, but in a way I would say it's a little bit more polished. and has a little bit more of a kind of a glossy, exciting feel to it than the original. So depending on what you like, I mean, it's kind of tit for tat on that. I do think this movie, so this is a extremely entertaining movie. You know, I wasn't bored for a minute. Like I've said, this movie does an excellent job of building these tension, some great moments and some great kind of like scares where we could have looked at the kind of the shark attacking and kind of making a menace. Relatively low body count and not a lot of gore. Obviously, if you compare this to a movie like Sharkbait, which came out recently, another movie, that went for visceral kind of thrills, gory deaths. This one goes for a you know, more of a kind of a tension and atmosphere kind of building. So it may be depending on what you like better. Then they're both kind of worth checking out. But this one is a good movie. It's certainly a little bit more polished and kind of glossy than the original film, I would say. But it's certainly an entertaining one, certainly in the category of a worthwhile watch, beating movies like Great White or The Requiem that have come out kind of quite recently. I was toying whether to give this one a 6 or a 7, to be honest. So I would kind of say like a 6.5 in a way. I don't really like giving half marks, but I'm really torn on how to score this one. So I would say a 6.5, even though I don't have a graphic for that. But yeah, it's worth a watch if you like a shark movie. I don't think it's necessarily an all-time classic, but it's definitely in the upper echelons of decent shark movies, of which the list is not all that big, to be honest. Have you seen it? Will you watch it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.